Hey guys, tonight we're stepping aboard a pirate ship. Not just any ship, but one with women among its crew. You're somewhere off the coast of Jamaica. The air is thick with salt and smoke, and the creaking of the wooden planks beneath your bare feet mingles with the distant squawk of gulls. You peer over the railing. The water below glows faintly under a half-moon sky, churning softly with the ship's slow glide. Everything smells of brine and old canvas. But there's a strange tension on board. The wind is too quiet. The lookout hasn't called down in a while. And something, maybe instinct, tells you this night won't end like the others. You probably wouldn't survive if you lived there, honestly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm here every night to help you unwind with quiet, curious stories from history. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this little ship sails each night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The ship you're aboard doesn't have cannons large enough to challenge a naval frigate, and yet, that's exactly what appears on the horizon now, looming like a waking nightmare. A British flag snaps in the wind, its colors stark even in the moonlight. You hear the urgent scuffle of boots on wood, the muffled curses of men and women rushing to arm themselves with whatever they can grab. You duck into the shadows near a barrel of dried fish. Heart pounding. The ship's captain barks orders. She's a woman. That surprises you. She's sharp-eyed, sunburned, with a bandana tied tight and a dagger clenched between her teeth. This isn't just a ship with women on board. It's run by them. A shot cracks the silence. Then another. Cannonballs splash too close, sending up geysers of salt water. The pirates try to steer away, but the Navy ship is faster, heavier, and full of trained men who are paid handsomely to bring in pirates, especially female ones. They make the best headlines. You hold your breath as grappling hooks clatter against the hull. Rope ladders fall. The boarding begins. There's no cinematic sword fight, no dramatic last stand. The pirates are too exhausted, too outgunned. Within minutes, the deck is swarming with redcoats. Some pirates surrender, others are thrown down and bound. You watch as a teenage girl is yanked by her hair, her face smeared with ash and defiance. Another woman, older, hardened, glares at her captor with a look that says, "You've caught me, but you'll never break me." The British sailors don't know what to make of them. A woman pirate? Isn't that just a myth? Some of them smirk. Others look genuinely disturbed, as though they've seen something unnatural. You're led below deck, forced to sit in the dark with the rest of the prisoners. There are maybe 4 women. One whispers in French, another hums softly, as if to lull herself to sleep. The girl with the ash-streaked face bites at her ropes. Historians still argue whether some of these women were true pirates or simply passengers. You overhear one officer say above deck, "But either way, they'll hang." You stare at the flickering lantern as it swings from a nail, casting shadows that dance across the damp walls. You wonder what will happen next, not just to you, but to them. You've heard stories of captured pirates being hanged in port cities, their bodies left to rot in cages as a warning. But what happens to women pirates? The ship lurches. You're moving again, bound for the nearest colonial harbor. Maybe Kingston, maybe Port Royal, somewhere with a jail and a courtroom, somewhere with Gallows already waiting. The pirate girl, the one who sang, leans her head against the wood and smiles. "You ever hear about Anne Bonny?" she whispers. "They caught her once. She just said, 'Sorry, boys, I'm pregnant,' and they let her live." You try to smile back, but you don't know whether to hope or fear. Above, the sea wind shifts. The scent of land creeps in, wet stone, distant fire, palm trees, and prison walls. Sleep doesn't come easy in chains. Your wrists ache. The girl eventually quiets. Someone coughs. You can hear the British crew laughing up top, already writing letters home about the lady corsairs they've captured. And somewhere, far from the cell, rumors are beginning to spread. Not about the battle, not about the loot, but about the fact that women were caught with cutlasses in hand, pistols tucked into their belts, and powder burns on their cheeks. That's the part people will remember. The rest, well, it's easier to forget what happens after the pirate tale ends. But that's the story we're telling tonight, because not all of them died, and not all of them faded away. Some of them talked, some of them lied, some of them sang, and some of them vanished, never to be seen again. The journey to shore is slow and rough, the sea choppy with morning light, and your wrists are rubbed raw from the iron cuffs. The chains rattle with every tilt of the ship, like distant wind chimes made of rust and judgment. You sit shoulder to shoulder with the other prisoners, women and men alike, though you're kept apart, segregated, like curiosities. The young French girl from before dozes against the hull, her mouth slightly open, muttering half dreams. One of the British sailors chuckles, watching her like she's a pet parrot instead of a prisoner. You can tell they don't know what to do with you all. Not really. Women pirates don't fit into the neat boxes they've built for lawbreakers. Above deck, the sun climbs, and the sailors complain about the smell of gunpowder and perfume. Someone jokes. The older woman, the one with the gray streak in her braid, narrows her eyes and spits on the floor. She's already been questioned. You heard the boots, the shouting, the silence. She returned with bruises blooming like violets across her cheek. They're trying to separate you now, not just physically, but with questions. Endless questions. How did you come aboard? Were you taken by force? Did you dress as a man to fool the crew? Were you anyone's wife? You try to stay quiet. There's no correct answer, only ones that suit the story they have already chosen. If you admit to being a pirate, you're a monster. If you say you were forced, you're a victim. There's no in-between, no room for pride or power. A guard leads you up to the deck for air. The coastline is near, lush and green, with mountains crouched behind colonies of stone and smoke. You squint at the distant docks, imagining the scaffold waiting there. Birds circle overhead, as if curious about your fate. They line you up now, right there on deck, one by one. It's like being weighed and measured for a grim sort of theater. The captain of the Navy ship paces slowly in front of you. His mustache is too neat. His boots are too polished. He stops in front of the pirate with the braid and nods at the soldier beside him. "She's confirmed," he says. "Armed, witnessed." Then he stops in front of you. His gaze lingers. "Not on the manifest," he mutters. "No record of a woman by that name." You glance at the girl beside you. She grins with the faintest trace of mischief. She gave a false name. You realize you could too, but the choice feels like standing on a cliff edge. Step wrong, and the fall is permanent. "Strip her," the captain orders. "If she disguised herself as a man, we'll know." The air thickens. You hear the snap of a belt, the scuffle of resistance. The girl shrieks as they drag her behind a canvas screen. You hear laughter, then silence. Later, she returns wrapped in an old Navy coat, face pale, lips tight. She doesn't meet your eyes again. Historians still argue whether women like her joined willingly or were pressed into service. One of the crew mutters as he walks past, as if the truth can be boiled down to a theory. The ship docks with a heavy groan. You're herded onto the planks like cattle, watched by townsfolk who have already heard rumors. Women pirates. Their faces are lit with wonder, judgment, curiosity, and something else. Something like fear. The jail is a small, crumbling place made of limestone and regret. You pass through its iron gates and into a world of stink and shadows. Rats skitter across the floor, indifferent to your chains. Inside, a clerk with ink-stained fingers records your name in a ledger. He pauses, squinting up at you. "You're not the first girl pirate we've had," he says. "But you might be the last." You're put into a cell with barred windows and a thin layer of straw for bedding. There are no beds, no blankets, only the scraping of metal and the low murmur of others already waiting. The older woman with the gray-streaked braids sits beside you. "They'll come for us tomorrow," she says. "Some of us will be questioned, others paraded." You ask her name. She doesn't answer. Instead, she tells you about her ship, about the storms they survived, the sugar they stole, the song they sang after escaping a Spanish galleon. "Not bad for a bunch of whores and thieves," she adds with a wry smile. You drift to sleep that night with your back against the wall and your ears tuned to the whispers in the dark. Someone is praying, someone else is coughing, a deep, wet sound that makes your stomach turn. The cell smells like mold and metal and fear. But there's something else too, a strange quiet, like the kind that settles just before dawn. You realize then, the sea was brutal, the capture cruel. But this waiting might be the worst part. And tomorrow, they'll decide who gets a trial and who simply disappears. You close your eyes. The last thing you hear is the French girl humming again. Only this time, the tune is different, sadder, softer. It sounds like something you might have heard once, aboard a ship, beneath the stars, before everything turned. You don't wake up so much as rise, slowly, groggily, from the cold that seeped into your bones overnight. Your neck aches, your arms are stiff from shackles. The first light creeping through the barred window is soft, almost gentle, but nothing about this day will be. Boots stomp down the corridor. The door creaks open. Guards bark names. Yours is among them. You're marched out with 3 others. Chains clinking with every step. The hallway smells like sour sweat and damp stone. A nervous man with an ink pot strapped to his hip trails behind, scribbling notes as if he's documenting cattle for slaughter. Outside, the sun is harsh, blinding. You blink until the blurred shapes become buildings, people, carriages. A crowd gathers, some with baskets of fruit, some with children perched on their shoulders. One woman whispers to her friend, "Look, that one's hardly older than my niece." Another scoffs. They dress up like men and think they're invincible. You're paraded through the streets like a sideshow. You catch glimpses of posters nailed to walls, crude illustrations of female pirates, their bosoms exaggerated, swords raised. The titles are always something like The Devil's Daughters or Hell Maids of the Sea. Historians still argue whether these caricatures fueled public opinion or merely reflected it. You'll hear one day, far from this cell, but right now, they sting like fresh lashes. The courthouse stands tall, sun-worn, flanked by guards who look as though they haven't blinked in years. Inside, it smells of ink, sweat, and old wood. The judge sits high above everyone, powdered wig askew, as if the heat has melted even the starch from his posture. You're shoved into a small wooden box, barely big enough to shift your stance. The others wait on benches behind you, silent, watching. The prosecutor clears his throat and begins with flourish. "Your Honor, the accused is not merely a woman, but a woman who took up arms against the crown, a woman who defied God's order and natural law. She dressed as a man, fought like a devil, and corrupted others with her behavior." You stare at the grain of the wood beneath your fingernails. Each word lands like a stone. You'd laugh if your mouth weren't so dry. They bring witnesses. One is a sailor from your ship. He shifts nervously as he speaks, clearly caught between truth and self-preservation. She fired a pistol, he says finally. Swore like the rest of them. She led a boarding once. Murmurs ripple through the crowd. The judge leans forward. Do you admit to being a pirate? You open your mouth, but the words feel like they belong to someone else. What could you possibly say that would change anything? That you joined because your husband died at sea and you had no home? That you were tired of being someone's servant, someone's wife, someone's burden? That the sea, wild and ruthless, gave you something land never could? Instead, you say nothing. The silence feels louder than any cry. The judge sighs dramatically. Then let the record show. The accused refuses to answer. You're dragged back to the benches while another woman is called up. This one is older, heavier, with a scar along her jaw. She glares at the room like she's already halfway to the gallows and has made peace with it. I was a cook, she growls. Fed the men, patched them up, didn't kill no one. Yet you chose to sail with them, the prosecutor insists. You chose piracy. She shrugs. A girl's gotta eat. The gallery chuckles, but not kindly. Outside the window, you catch sight of the scaffold being tested. A man tugs the rope, checking its tension. He looks bored. Back in the courtroom, the French girl finally speaks when called. She's trembling. Her voice barely carries. I was taken, she says. Kidnapped, forced to clean. I never... But then the prosecutor holds up a small pistol. Yours, he says. Found in your bunk. She bursts into tears. They love this part. The breakdown. The transformation from mythical pirate queen to sobbing girl. Later. As the crowd filters out and the courtroom empties, you're marched back through the streets. Someone throws an apple at the older woman. It misses. She laughs anyway. They want us to beg, she mutters under her breath. They want us to cry and promise to be good little girls again. You ask her what happens next. Trial's just for show, she says. They've already decided, but they'll drag it out. Keep the crowd entertained, especially with women. The jail welcomes you back like an old ghost. Your cell is still damp. Still smells like regret and mildew. You slump down in the straw and close your eyes. Somewhere. A guard lights a lantern. The flame flickers on the walls. They'll hang us together, the French girl whispers later. Her accent thickens when she's tired. Do you think people will remember? You don't answer, because you're not sure they will. The next morning, you hear them talking outside your cell. The clerk with the ink pot. The judge's assistant. They're trying to get one of them to talk, someone says. To name names, say who recruited them. Does it matter? Another voice replies. Hang them all. It's cleaner. You sit in the corner and let the morning sun warm your face. Your body aches, but there's a strange calm settling over you, like you've already slipped beneath the waves. Later, they bring bread, water, a sliver of hope, maybe, but it tastes like dust. And all you can think about is the ship, the salt spray, and the wind in your hair as you stood on deck, free, if only for a moment. By the third day, the mood in the jail has changed. Something's shifted, though it's hard to say exactly what. Maybe it's the heat, which clings to your skin like a damp cloth. Or maybe it's the whisper traveling from cell to cell. A name, a woman, a legend in progress. Mary Red. They bring her in before dawn, flanked by two guards who seem oddly unsure of themselves. She walks with her chin up, hair tucked under a weather-stained tricorn hat. Her boots are scuffed, but she wears them like armor. She doesn't glance at the other prisoners, doesn't flinch at the smell, just nods at the guard and says, "This'll do." You hear the clank of her chains as she settles into the far corner. For a long while, she says nothing. Then, finally, When the sun filters through the bars in thin golden lines, she speaks. So, she says, voice low but calm. Which one of you cried at your trial? A few snort. The French girl flushes. The older woman with the gray-streaked braid grins. You stay quiet. Mary Reed stretches her legs out, as if the cell were her living room. They love the crying, she continues. Makes for better theater. But me, I told the judge I'd rather hang as a pirate than live as a lady. She's not bragging, just stating fact. Over the next few days, the guards visit her often. Some try to intimidate her. Others seem oddly curious, almost deferential. You overhear their murmured debates. She served in the army. You know, as a man, apparently cavalry. Could ride, shoot, brawl. Better than most of us. Mary Reed listens with half a smile. Historians still argue whether I joined the army out of desperation or defiance, she mutters one day, polishing the buckle on her boot with a scrap of cloth. Doesn't matter, I looked good on horseback either way. Eventually, you gather enough courage to sit closer. She doesn't stop you. You ask how she ended up on a pirate ship. She leans back, closes her eyes, and begins. I was born to a widow who had no use for daughters, so she dressed me up as a boy to claim some inheritance. Liked how convenient it was. So did I. No one bothered boys. No one stared. I could work, move, breathe. She pauses, rubbing her wrist absently. The shackles have worn red marks into her skin. Later, I joined the army, under a different name, of course. Fought the French, stole a few horses, even got married to a man. Funny, right? You nod, not sure how else to react. He died, I drifted. Then I found Anne, Bonnie. The name rises like a wave through your chest. Anne Bonnie. You've heard it whispered in the dark, always with a mixture of awe and unease. Mary grins. She was fire, pure fire. We met aboard Calico Jack's ship. And let me tell you, the sea got a lot more interesting after that. You ask if the rumors are true, that they dressed as men in battle, that they fought side by side. Mary laughs. Oh, we dressed as men when it suited us, and we fought like devils when it didn't. Anne was reckless. I was ruthless. Jack mostly liked the headlines. You smile despite yourself, but the story doesn't end there. They caught us in the middle of the night, she says. The rest of the crew was drunk, too stupid to stand. Anne and I held the deck as long as we could. 2 pistols, 3 blades, and a lot of yelling. But they had numbers. She shrugs. Now here we are. The guards start treating her differently after that. One offers extra bread. Another brings a blanket. It's not kindness. It's something more complicated. Respect, maybe, or fear. Mary uses it to her advantage. She passes messages between cells. She shares scraps of tobacco. She even bribes a guard to let her see Anne, locked away in the next block. One night, she returns pale and silent, sits in the corner, staring at the wall. You ask what happened. She finally speaks, voice like broken glass. She's pregnant. You freeze. She told the judge. Mary adds. They postponed her sentence. Your heart thuds. The girl who sang, she claimed the same. Convenient timing, isn't it? The older woman says from her straw mat. Clever girl, but Mary doesn't smile. She didn't do it to save herself, she mutters. She did it because she's not going alone. The jail is quiet that night. No humming, no whispers, just the sound of rats and the occasional cough. You lie awake, thinking about what Mary said, about Anne Bonny, about how much of this is survival and how much is defiance. Because somehow, even here, surrounded by stone and iron, these women have found ways to resist, to fight with stories, silence, and small acts of rebellion. It makes you wonder what kind of pirate you were before all this. The next morning, Mary's gone. No warning, no sound, just an empty space in the cell. A guard shrugs when asked. Took her to a different jail, he says. High-profile prisoner. They want her separate. But you notice the look in his eyes. Uncertainty. Like he's not sure what really happened. You imagine her escaping, slipping out in disguise, bribing the right person, vanishing into the alleys with nothing but a grin and a pistol. Or maybe she's already on the gallows. You'll never know for sure. But either way, she left a story behind, one you won't forget. And in this place, where so much is stripped from you, your name, your freedom, your voice. Having a story is everything. The cell feels emptier without Mary. It's strange how someone can vanish and yet leave the air humming with their memory. The others fall quiet, as if her departure pulled all the heat and defiance with it. Even the French girl stops humming, but whispers travel fast in dark places. By midday, you hear her name again, not from a prisoner, but from a guard. She cursed him, the man mutters as he locks the cell. Looked the judge in the eye and spat. You lean against the wall, listening. More details tumble in. She said it plain. If you'd fought like a man, you wouldn't hang like a dog. You close your eyes and imagine it. Anne Bonny, with her wild red hair and storm-tossed eyes, standing in a courtroom built for silence and obedience. Imagine the hush that fell when she said it. Words like cannon fire echoing off stone. Anne Bonny, pirate, lover, fury wrapped in linen. She'd always been a rumor more than a person, but now she was real, flesh and blood, sentenced and waiting, somewhere nearby. And still, somehow, dangerous. Later that day, a woman is pulled from her cell across the hall. You hear her curse and struggle. You don't see her face, but you feel the mood change, like the sky tightening before a storm. Historians still argue whether Anne Bonny's words were recorded accurately. One guard says to another, but no one forgets them. In your cell, you repeat them under your breath, not for effect, but for strength. There's something powerful in that line, in how it cuts through fear and speaks of choice. It lingers. The next morning, you're taken out again. Not to court, not yet. This time, to the infirmary. You pretend not to know why, but you do. They're checking for signs of pregnancy. You lie on a wooden cot as a midwife pokes and prods. She doesn't speak to you, not really, just clicks her tongue and scribbles on parchment. She's seen dozens of women like you, and she's tired. There's always a few, she says finally. Some real, some lying. Some who aren't sure. You ask what happens if it's true. Postponement, she replies. Not mercy. Back in your cell. The French girl waits with wide eyes. Did they say anything? She asks, barely above a whisper. You shake your head. She nods, slowly, but you can see the tremble in her hands. By now, you've seen enough to understand what postponement really means. They'll delay it, yes, but only until the baby comes. After that, the rope remains. Still, it's something, a breath, a crack in the stone. You hear more stories from the guards over the next few days. Some gloat, others seem unsure, but all of them mention Anne again. She refused a dress, one says, chuckling. Said she'd swing in breeches, just to spite us. Refused the priest, too, another adds. Told him she'd already made peace with the sea. You wonder if she's still being held nearby. You picture her pacing her cell, arms crossed, jaw set. You picture the judge's face when she spoke those words, his powdered wig trembling, his gavel clenched like a weapon. There's talk of a public execution. Posters go up. The pirate queen to hang, they say. The illustration shows Anne in chains, lips curled in a sneer, sword broken at her feet. But the execution never comes. Days pass, then a week, then more. And one morning, just before dawn, a guard unlocks your cell with shaking hands. He's pale, unshaven. "She's gone," he says, almost to himself. You sit up slowly. "Who?" "Bonnie." You stare. "Escaped?" He hesitates. "No, just gone. They moved her. Or maybe they didn't." No one will say. You try not to hope, but you do. Maybe she bribed someone. Maybe she faked a death. Maybe the judge's soft-hearted wife intervened in the middle of the night, leaving a blank page in the court records. Whatever the truth, the posters are taken down. No one talks about it again. But those last words, they're everywhere. Scribbled on walls in chalk, whispers in taverns, jokes in alleyways. Even one of the guards has it carved into the handle of his knife. If you'd fought like a man, you wonder if the judge hears it in his sleep. Back in your cell, the older woman with the gray-streaked braid is peeling the bark off a small twig she must have smuggled in. She glances up. "Bonnie scared them," she says. "Not because she killed, because she wouldn't flinch." You nod. That's it, isn't it? That's what lingers. Not the crimes, not the trial, the refusal to be small. The next time the French girl is called to court, she walks straighter, doesn't cry. She returns with her mouth set in a line and her hands clenched into fists. "I said I was one of them," she says. "I said it proud." You don't know if it'll save her. Probably not. But she'll face what comes like a storm rolling across the deck, not a shadow hiding below it. That night, the jail feels different. The sea is close. You can smell it through the cracks in the stone. There's a warm breeze, just enough to stir your hair as you lie back in the straw. You dream of sails and blood-orange sunsets, of freedom, just for a moment, and the thunder of cannon fire far in the distance. And in the dream, you hear Anne Bonny's voice, not angry, but calm. "I fought," she says. Can they say the same? Morning crawls into the jail cell with its usual ache, sunlight filtering through grime-streaked bars, the rustle of rats in the corners, and the ever-present scent of mildew clinging to the air like a second skin. But today, something is different. There's an unease creeping through the corridors. You feel it in the footsteps of the guards, faster, sharper, in the way the iron door creaks open just a little earlier than usual. They're counting now, not heads, but bellies. 3 women have already claimed it. Pregnancy. 2 are real. The third, you're not so sure. But in this place, truth is just another tool. They call the French girl again. This time, she doesn't hesitate. She follows the midwife down the corridor with her shoulders back, chin high. You watch her vanish through the archway and wonder if she's afraid, or if pretending not to be is simply the only option left. A long hour passes before she returns, face flushed, hands trembling. "Well," you whisper. "They believe me," she breathes, sitting down with a soft thud. "They wrote my name on a separate list. You've heard of that list. The postponed. It buys time, not freedom. A stay of execution, but only until the child is born. After that, well fed for 9 months, then a noose." The older woman says dryly, as she leans against the wall and exhales a wheezy chuckle, "But hey, maybe the rope'll break." That earns a small laugh. It's rare in here, too rare. The idea isn't new. Female prisoners have long used pregnancy as a shield. Quickening is what they call it, the point at which movement can be felt, and therefore a life is confirmed. Until then, suspicion reigns. Some lie, some hope, some genuinely don't know, and the law, twisted thing that it is, treats that unborn life as more valuable than the woman who carries it. You begin to notice the quiet negotiations, the whispers in corners. Some are asking guards for favors, others offering coin, or more desperate things. You hear one girl murmuring to herself, just say it, and they'll move you. A guard stands outside your cell that afternoon, scratching something onto a clipboard. He doesn't look at you directly, just says, "You'll be checked next." You nod, you don't protest, you don't plan anything, but the thought begins to take root. What if you said yes? What if you let them believe it? You wouldn't be the first. In fact, you'd be joining a long tradition. Women throughout history doing what they must to outlast the system designed to crush them. You lie awake that night staring at the ceiling, wondering what the ocean smells like this time of year, wondering whether you'd still recognize the taste of freedom if it ever found your lips again. The next morning, you're led to the infirmary. The midwife from before greets you with the same tired frown. She gestures for you to lie down. You do. Her hands are cold, clinical. She says nothing at first. Then, almost softly, "You look like you've been thinking about it." You don't answer. She presses gently on your abdomen, listens to your breathing, watches your face for any hint of a lie. When she's done, she stands, wipes her hands, and says, "You'll be listed as undetermined." It's neither a postponement nor a condemnation. Just a pause, a comma in a sentence that hasn't decided how to end. You return to the cell with nothing new to hold on to, except the weight of maybe. The French girl, meanwhile, has begun to change. She eats more, speaks less. Her hands rest protectively on her stomach, even though no movement stirs yet. You hear the guards talking about her. "She's too young," one says. "Barely a woman." "Old enough to hang," the other mutters. That's how it is here. Childhood and adulthood, guilt and innocence. None of it really matters once you're in chains. But the pregnancy delays things. Trials stall, lists grow longer. The gallows, for now, remain unused. In the courtyard, you watch as laundry flaps in the wind. The women from the other cells are allowed to work sometimes, under heavy supervision. It gives them something to do, a rhythm, a reminder that the world outside still turns. One of them, an older woman with sun-leathered skin, tells a story as she folds a sheet. "Saw a girl once," she says, "years ago. Claims she was with child. They delayed it, sure, but when the baby came, they took her out 2 days later, hung her at dawn, didn't even let her nurse. The sheet flutters in her hands. They gave the baby to the church. No one ever saw it again." You carry that story back into your cell. Set it down beside your breath, your heartbeat, your unspoken thoughts. The French girl begins to hum again, a soft lullaby, maybe one from her childhood. It carries through the stone like smoke, curling around the bars, the beams, the bones of this place. You close your eyes and listen. Somewhere out there, in another town or island, there's probably a court debating whether one unborn child justifies the survival of a woman. And somewhere else, there's likely another jail cell with a woman gripping her belly, hoping. Historians still argue whether the women who claimed pregnancy were clever or desperate, whether it was deception or maternal instinct, whether it was a survival tactic or an act of grace in the face of cruelty. But here, in this damp little corner of the world, you know one thing for certain. It worked, at least for now, and in a place where tomorrow is always uncertain. For now is sometimes the closest thing to salvation you're going to get. You press your head against the cool stone and let the song carry you. You're not free, not yet, but you're still here, and somehow, that's enough. Rain falls softly that morning, dripping through cracks in the jail's roof, darkening the straw and slicking the stone floors beneath your feet. The guards don't bother to mop it up. They rarely do. You huddle in the corner, knees to your chest, watching droplets form, swell, and fall, tiny, silent punctuations in the stillness. The French girl has been moved. They came for her at sunrise. No explanation. She looked back once over her shoulder, eyes wide and silent, and then she was gone. You ask the gray-braided woman if she thinks the girl will live. She just snorts. She might, if she's lucky, or if the priest likes her face. You want to believe she's safe, that she's somewhere dry and warm, her hands on her stomach, waiting for a gentler kind of future. But you know better now. Later that afternoon, a story drifts into the cell block, passed from guard to prisoner, whispered like gossip, but heavier, stranger. A nun, someone says. A pirate nun. You raise your head. It sounds absurd, but absurdity has never kept a story from growing legs in a place like this. They say she was captured a year ago, somewhere near Martinique, wore men's clothes, carried a blade, raided Spanish ships, but when her time came to hang, she asked for a priest, not to confess, but to be taken to a convent. You laugh, but not cruelly. The idea sounds like fantasy. She swore she'd taken her vows before ever sailing. A guard tells another, just outside the door. It said she only turned pirate to fund her orphanage. And they believed her? The first guard shrugs. Maybe. Or maybe they just didn't want the scandal. You sit up straighter. It's not the story itself that pulls you in, but the idea that someone, somehow, walked out of all this alive, wrapped in the robes of a nun rather than a noose. The woman's name, you hear, was Isabella del Sol, Spanish by birth, raised in Havana. She'd joined a convent young, but had fled during a fire. Whether it was arson or accident, no one's sure. What followed was nearly a decade at sea, dressed as a man, sailing under at least 3 different captains. She was known for her aim with a pistol and her refusal to drink. She slept with a rosary tucked beneath her coat, swore in Latin, refused to pillage churches. Some called her cursed, others blessed. When she was finally caught, they say she stood before the governor in chains, hair matted, face bruised, and quoted scripture. "If I must perish," she said, "then let it be in God's house, not on your gallows." The tale twists depending on who tells it. Some say the governor agreed to her request out of fear. Others say the bishop intervened. One version claims she blackmailed an official with a secret. Another insists she bribed a monk. But, however it happened, she wasn't hanged. She was sent, quietly, under guard, to a convent on the island of Hispaniola. That was a year ago, and no one's seen her since. The gray-haired woman scoffs. She's probably dead, or married to some merchant and selling fish by now. But you feel something stir in your chest. Hope, not the loud, foolish kind. Not the kind that sings or dances. The quiet kind. The kind that lays low, curled in your belly, and waits. That night, when the guards do their rounds, one lingers at your bars. He's younger than most, with a freckled face and a nervous posture. "You hear about the nun?" he asks. You nod. "My sister's in Hispaniola," he says softly. "Said she saw her, swears it." You rise slowly from your mat. "What did she say she looked like?" He pauses. Tall, quiet, always in the garden, doesn't speak to the others, but she walks like a soldier. You imagine it. A woman in a black habit, rosary in hand, treading the gravel paths like she still hears the rhythm of waves beneath her feet. You ask him if he believes it's really her. He glances around, then shrugs. Does it matter? You don't answer. Because it does. It matters because it means the story doesn't always end here. It matters because someone once carved a different path out of the same stone walls and shackles you're staring at now. You whisper her name as you lie back down. Isabella. You picture her watching the sea from behind high convent walls, the breeze lifting her veil. Her mind still half aboard a ship she'll never see again. You wonder if she regrets anything, or if, like Anne, she refused to give them the satisfaction. The next day, one of the younger prisoners asks you to tell her the story. You do. You tell it slowly, gently, like a bedtime tale. The kind that lulls, that comforts, that makes the dark feel just a little less endless. Others gather to listen. Even the gray-haired woman leans in. And as your voice winds through the stones, you realize you've done something rare here, something nearly sacred. You've given them a woman who lived, not gloriously, not forever, but enough. Enough to matter, enough to be remembered. 3 days later, a new kind of silence settles over the jail, thick and wrong, like the sky before a storm that never breaks. It's not the silence of hopelessness. You've learned that one well by now. No, this is the silence of uncertainty. The guards won't meet your eyes. The cook forgets to grumble. Even the priest, who usually offers scripture like spoonfuls of vinegar, stays away. Then a name is called, not for trial, not for sentencing, just called, curt and clipped. A girl is taken. She doesn't return. Then another name, then a third. The fourth hesitates at the cell door, her hands trembling, her lips parted as if she wants to ask where she's going. But the guards don't answer. No one does. The older woman with the gray braid watches them vanish one by one, her fingers tapping against her leg. She doesn't look surprised. Servitude, she mutters at last. You glance at her. They're not killing us, she says. Not all of us. They're selling us. Your stomach knots. You've heard whispers. Rumors pass between cells like scraps of bread. That some women weren't executed but disappeared into plantations, kitchens, or brothels. Their names wiped clean, their stories reduced to ash. Better than hanging, you ask? She snorts. Depends on where you end up. Some wish for the rope after the first week. That night, a ship docks in the harbor. You hear its arrival in the distance, wood groaning, ropes slapping, sailors shouting. Not a Navy ship, something leaner, merchant, private. The next morning, the process begins. You're taken to a courtyard behind the courthouse, blinking against the sudden glare of sun. A dozen other women stand nearby, some barefoot, some bruised. The air smells like sweat and smoke. You're lined up under a canvas awning as two men walk past slowly, talking in low voices. One holds a ledger, the other, a whip. You recognize the setup from stories. An informal auction, quiet, but no less real. A man pauses in front of you, looks at your arms, your shoulders, asks your age. You don't answer. He moves on. Another stops beside the French girl. She's shaking. He nods, points. She's pulled from the line. You don't see her again. The bidding isn't loud. There are no raised hands or shouted numbers. It's whispered negotiations, scribbled notes, sealed documents. This is the part of piracy no one sings about in the ballads. You aren't sold that day, or the next. But the line gets shorter, and the jail, strangely, gets quieter. No more trials, no more judges, just waiting. One night, the young guard with freckles lingers longer than usual. He clears his throat, glancing down the corridor. They're sending you to Bridgetown, he whispers. Private buyer, plantation. You feel the words hit, low and heavy. When? You ask. Tomorrow, before dawn. You ask if he knows anything about the buyer. He hesitates. Lady, widow, sugar estate. He says it like that's supposed to make it better. You ask if she's cruel. I don't know, he says quietly, but she pays well. You lie awake that night, tracing the ceiling cracks with your eyes, thinking of everything that's happened, of Anne Bonny's last words, of Mary Reed's steady defiance, of Isabella in her garden, hands folded, veil catching wind like a sail, and now, this. A different kind of sentence. You don't sleep, not really. The next morning, you're taken from your cell before the sun rises. No chains this time, just a firm grip on your arm and a silent escort down to the dock. The ship is smaller than you expected. Sleek. Quiet. It smells like tar and coffee. You're not alone. 3 other women are already on board. One stares blankly at the waves. Another clutches a locket to her chest. The third keeps her eyes closed and whispers something over and over under her breath. The crew ignores you. You're cargo. Nothing more. As the ship pulls away from the dock, you watch the island grow smaller, the gallows shrink into distant shapes, the jail fade into stone and sky. You wonder if anyone will remember you, if your name will survive, or if, like so many others, you'll be buried in silence, folded into ledgers, scrubbed from stories. You sit on a crate near the bow and close your eyes. And somewhere behind them, the sea begins to speak again, not in words, but in wind, in waves, in the memory of rope against your wrists, and salt in your hair, and sails snapping against a sky that once promised freedom. Historians still argue whether these women, sold instead of hanged, were spared or merely recycled. Some say they were forgotten, but you know better. You're still here. And the story, whatever it becomes, isn't over yet. Bridgetown rises from the sea like a mirage. Pale stone buildings rimmed in coral pink, streets coiled with carts and dust, and smoke curling up from cook fires that never seem to go out. It should feel exotic. It should feel like a rival. But to you, it just feels like a smaller cell with a longer reach. The guards unload you without ceremony. No chains, no hoods, just a firm hand at your back, steering you onto the wharf. From there, it's a short ride up the hill in a rattling wagon. The road winds between sugarcane fields that whisper in the breeze, their green blades slicing the horizon like razors. The house itself is large but tired, a plantation manor with cracked shutters and flaking paint. A white-haired woman steps out to meet the wagon, her skirt stiff with starch, her hands like claws wrapped around a walking stick. She doesn't introduce herself, but you hear the overseer call her Madam Wells. She nods once at the group of you, mutters something about work and order, and turns away before your name is even spoken. You're led around the back, past rows of drying laundry and sour-eyed servants, to a squat stone building nestled beside the stables. Inside are straw beds, a wooden table, and a single cracked mirror nailed to the wall. The other women don't speak much that first day. Not out of fear, just exhaustion. You all know the rules now. Keep your head down. Don't speak unless spoken to. Pretend you're no one, and maybe you'll be allowed to stay that way. But on the second night, the whispering begins. At first, you think it's the wind, a soft hiss curling around the doorframe. But then, you realize it's coming from the far end of the room, from a woman with hair the color of slate and eyes that never blink for long. Listen, she says, tapping the side of her head. The island remembers. You ask her what she means. She smiles. This isn't just a place where they put people they don't want to kill. It's where the ones they can't kill end up. You frown. Can't kill? Too loud? Too well known? Too inconvenient. So, they're sent here. To vanish. But politely. You laugh once, dry and low. Sounds familiar. The woman grins. Then you'll fit right in. Her name is Mina, and she's been here for 2 years. Says she used to sail with a captain who robbed French galleons blind. Got caught, but not executed. Sold like the rest of you, then passed from plantation to plantation until she landed here. They think we forget, she tells you, that we rot into something small, but we remember. And this island remembers with us. You think she's being poetic until you see the wall. It's in the basement of the storage house, behind a loose board. A guard sends you down there to fetch a broom. You pull the board aside, and there it is. A stretch of stone marked with dozens of scratches. Symbols, names, pieces of songs. At the top, someone carved a line in rough Latin. You don't know what it means, but the rhythm feels familiar. You reach out and run your fingers across one of the names. Eliza Vane. You whisper it to yourself like a prayer. You tell Mina about it later. She nods. That wall's been growing since before I got here. Women leave their names behind. Sometimes a line from their last song. Sometimes just the date. Why, you ask? So the silence doesn't win? After that, you start listening differently. To the way the wind hisses through the sugar cane. To the rhythm of the creaking floors at night. To the soft tapping of fingers against the edge of a bed frame. It's not silence at all. It's a language, one spoken by survivors. Some nights, women hum to themselves in the dark. Old sea shanties, lullabies they used to sing to children who now live with other names, in other places. One woman writes verses in the dust under her cot. Another has memorized 3 entire letters she was never allowed to send. And you, well, you start to dream again. Not of rope or courtrooms, but of salt air and open sails and laughter on a moonlit deck. Of the woman you were before your name was inked into a ledger and traded for coin. You find a piece of charcoal in the ashes one morning. That night, you slip into the storage room and carve 3 letters into the wall. Not your full name, just enough. You don't cry while you do it, but something in you unknots, just a little. The next day, Mina winks at you as you pass. She knows. They always know. The overseers think this is punishment, exile, but they don't understand what happens when women like you are left in a place long enough. You become roots. You become rumor, and rumor, whispered often enough, become something close to truth. Historians still argue whether these women were ever truly free again, Mina says one evening as you rest beneath the porch. But they never stopped being pirates. Not really. You ask her if she thinks anyone will come for her. If anyone remembers. She looks out at the cane fields, the wind bending the stalks like kneeling supplicants. No, she says, but the sea does. That night, the rain comes heavy. Thunder grumbles over the hills. The other women sing softly in the dark, not to drown it out, but to keep time with it, like they're still aboard a ship, rocking to the pulse of the storm. You add your voice to theirs, quiet at first, then stronger, and in the distance, through the window, you could almost swear the surf is answering. Weeks pass on the island, marked not by calendars or clocks, but by the changing shape of the cane fields and the strange, ritual quiet before evening rains. You settle into the rhythm because you have no choice, but something inside you never softens. It just waits. Then, one morning, there's a commotion at the house. You and the others watch from behind the drying laundry. A carriage rolls up the hill, its wheels creaking beneath the weight of someone important. 2 men step out, one with a cane, the other holding a thick leather portfolio. Both wear fine coats, far too warm for this heat, and look around as if they're not quite sure what they're looking for. They're here for someone, Mina whispers beside you. She's right. Later that day, a name is called, but it isn't yours. It's a girl named Clara, young, quiet, barely more than a shadow among you. The overseer tells her to pack. She doesn't even ask why. She's gone before sunset. Rumors bloom like flowers after rain. She was pardoned, someone whispers. Cleared by the crown. No, her brother bribed the council. No, it's worse. She's going to be paraded back in England. As an example, you don't know what to believe. So many stories in this place twist back on themselves. What starts as rumor becomes memory, then gets written down as history, and suddenly it's truth. That night, Mina sits beside you, her knees creaking as she folds herself into the grass. I was offered a pardon once, she says softly. Didn't take it? You blink at her. Why not? She shrugs. It wasn't real. They wanted me to sign something, confess, write a little story that made me look like a fool and them like saints. You frown. A confession? Worse, a fable. They asked me to say I was forced into piracy, that I cried during raids, that I begged for forgiveness before every strike. She shakes her head. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a tale to frighten girls with. You stare at the horizon, where the cane fields melt into dusk. And if you had signed it, they would have sent me to London, paraded me in a courtroom, maybe even let me go free, on paper. She sighs, but not in the way that mattered. Historians still argue whether pardoned pirates truly regain their lives, she adds, brushing ants from her skirt. Most were forgotten. Some were turned into cautionary tales. One or two got a book deal. You laugh, just once, but it's hollow, because you've started to see the pattern now. The way the world above turns pirate women into lessons, warnings. Morality plays for dinner parties. She dared too much, they say. She loved the wrong man. She mistook freedom for destiny. And so, she paid the price. Never mind that the men she sailed with were hanged and hailed in the same breath. Heroes of infamy, legends. But the women? The women must either repent or vanish. A few days later, a man arrives on horseback. He wears ink on his fingers and speaks with the sharp accent of someone educated in London, but never taught to listen. He's a writer, they say, a chronicler. He's here to gather accounts from pirates, from women like you. You're called into the house and made to sit in a stiff chair while he interviews you. His quill scratches fast across the parchment. He barely looks up. Were you taken by force? He asks. No. Did you know you were breaking the law? Yes. Did you cry during your capture? No. He pauses at that. Did you ever regret it? You consider lying. You don't. Not once. You say. He hums as if that answer doesn't fit the narrative he came to collect. His quill slows. Would you say you were seduced into piracy? He asks, too casually. Your mouth curves, just slightly. I wasn't seduced. I volunteered. Another pause. Right, he mutters. We'll revise that. And just like that, your truth becomes a draft, a sketch, a sentence to be rewritten by someone who will never know what the rope smelled like at dawn, or how it felt to fire a pistol with your name tied to its barrel. He interviews 6 more women, then leaves on the morning tide. The next week, a pamphlet arrives. You catch a glimpse of it in the overseer's hands, a cheap print with a dramatic title, Maids of the Devil, The Confessions of Lady Corsairs. Your name isn't in it, but someone like you is. The stories twist the facts. One woman is described as weeping at the sight of blood, another as praying mid-raid. A third is drawn kneeling before a noose, her hair loose and saintly. It's pulp, theater, sold to people who need the world to make sense, where women only rebel because they're mad, lost, or corrupted. Mina sees your face as you walk back from the courtyard. Don't let it eat you, she says gently. Let them sell their lies. We've still got ours. She gestures at the storage room wall where more names have appeared. Real names, crooked lines, bits of truth, scratched into stone by fingers that refuse to let go. You visit the wall that evening, pressing your palm to its surface. It's cool and solid beneath your hand. No ink here, no quills, just stories told in quiet defiance. You reach for the charcoal again. This time, you write a full sentence. We were not sorry. It takes up a full stone. The writing isn't pretty, but it's yours, and it won't be revised. The heat that day is unrelenting. It wraps around you like wet wool, clinging to your skin, pooling at the small of your back. Even the air feels still, like it's waiting for something to break. You sit in the shade of the outer wall, turning the same idea over and over in your mind, like a coin in your palm. Mina's cough has gotten worse. She tries to hide it, but every time she speaks more than a sentence or laughs too hard, it rattles in her chest like a bottle of stones. You offer her water. She takes it with a tired smile. It's the damp, she says. This island rots everything eventually. You start to believe her when the younger women begin disappearing again. Not sold, not pardoned, just gone, no farewell, no bags packed, no explanations from the overseers. One day, they're at the wash basin or feeding the chickens, and the next morning, their beds are empty and the others look away when you ask. Mina pulls you aside under the cover of night. Her whisper is hoarse. They've started marooning again. You stare at her. That's just a myth. She shakes her head. Not here, not always. There's an island off the northern coast, barely a pile of rock and scrub. They've been using it for years. When a woman's too much trouble, or too ill to be sold, they drop her there. Quietly. No records. You don't want to believe it, but she's not the type to invent stories. And the next morning, when another woman named Beth, clever, quick, and bold, vanishes after shouting at the overseer, you realize Mina's telling the truth. The idea of marooning always sounded like a sailor's nightmare. Cast off with a pistol and a single shot. Left to die on an island no ship maps would admit to. You'd read it in books. Once. Boys' adventure novels. Something almost romantic. But this is slow. It's quiet. And it's real. You start watching the guards more closely. The ones who carry food baskets to the dock at dawn. The skiff that returns without a passenger. The way their eyes avoid yours. One night, when you're helping the kitchen girl peel cassava roots, you ask if she's heard of it. She glances around, then nods. They call it Rag Island, she says, but not on any map. If they send you there, no one asks questions. No one sails back for you. You swallow hard. How long do people survive? She shrugs. Depends. A week, maybe 2, sometimes longer. Some make shelters, catch rainwater. I heard one woman dug a well with her bare hands. The thought gnaws at you. Not just the fear of being sent, but the idea of being left behind. Of your life ending where no one would ever know your name. No wall would bear your story. No one would sing for you. You sit with Mina that night, staring up at the stars. The air is thick with insects and the sweet rot of mango trees. I wouldn't last 3 days, she says, not bitterly, just matter of fact. These lungs wouldn't make it through the first storm. You offer to speak on her behalf. Ask the overseer to send her back to town. She smiles. To what? The scaffold? Another cell? No, thank you. Then she leans closer. But if they take me, don't let me vanish. Scratch me onto the wall. Tell someone. Anyone. You nod. You promise. And then, 2 days later, she's gone. Not in the night. Not with ceremony. You return from the field and find her bed neatly made, her blanket folded, no note, no goodbye. But her name, her real name, is scrawled in charcoal on the inside of her bedpost. 3 simple words beneath it: still here, still mine. You press your palm to it and don't speak for a long time. The next morning, the skiff returns from the sea, empty. You ask a guard where she went. He doesn't answer, just turns away. You don't carve her name on the wall that night, not yet. You light a candle and wait until the moon is high. Then you carry it down to the cellar and trace her letters slowly, carefully, into the stone. Mina Nels, still here. You hum one of her old sea songs while you do it, just under your breath. That week, 2 more women disappear, and the others begin sleeping closer together, their mats pressed end to end like a single shield. No one speaks of the island aloud anymore, but every night, eyes flick toward the door, listening, waiting. Historians still argue whether marooning was mercy or cruelty, whether it gave women a fighting chance or just prolonged the inevitable. Some claim it didn't happen at all, that it was too barbaric, even for pirates. But you know better. You saw the empty beds, the skiff, the basket of food, lower gently into the hull like an apology. You still dream of that island sometimes. Rag Island. You picture Mina crouched beneath a palm tree, building a lean-to from branches and prayer, still refusing to bow to anyone. And in the dreams, she's not alone. You see others, silent, watching, a small village of forgotten women who refuse to die on someone else's terms. You wake up with the image still in your mind, the sound of the surf, the heat of the sand, the whisper of a name that refuses to fade, and for a few seconds, you believe that maybe they didn't just survive. Maybe they built something. Maybe they're still out there, waiting. The next name they call isn't yours, but it's close. Close enough that your breath catches and your pulse jumps in your neck like a drum. A woman steps forward from the far side of the workyard. You recognize her, though barely. She's one of the quiet ones. Always has been. They called her Elsie, but she never answered to it. Not really. She walks like a sailor, steady knees, squared shoulders. And when the guards lead her away, she doesn't flinch, just lifts her chin, as if she's been expecting this. By sundown, the rumors churn again. But this time, they're different. Not about pardons or maroonings. Not about punishments. This time, it's about escape. She wasn't supposed to be here, someone mutters. She wasn't on the manifest. She faked it, says another. Took someone else's name. They didn't know she was even a woman. You think back, how she always wore her hair tied tight beneath a cap, kept to herself, moved with the quiet confidence of someone used to being overlooked. Then, at dinner, one of the older women leans close to you and says, "She was crew." You blink. What? Not a prisoner. She wasn't captured like us. She snuck in, hid with us during processing, waited for her chance. You sit back, stunned. The idea settles slowly. She had disguised herself, not to avoid punishment, but to disappear into it. And for a time, it worked. Mina had once mentioned women like her, pirates who dressed and lived as men, not just at sea, but in port, in courtrooms, in jails. They passed, Mina had said, better than some men did. You lie awake that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it would feel like to vanish into someone else, to slip past the cracks in the wall and live just long enough for the world to forget what you used to be. You start to notice other things too. A woman in the kitchen who cuts her sleeves with a sailor's knot. One of the older laborers who sharpens her hoe like a blade. A girl with calloused fingers who never talks but hums shanties no plantation worker would know. You begin to wonder how many of them aren't who they claim to be. And then the stories start to surface. Some escape the gallows not by pleading for mercy, but by blending in, cutting their hair, binding their chests, answering only to borrowed names. One, it's said, boarded a whaling ship the day after her sentence was handed down, stowed away for 2 weeks before anyone noticed. By then, she was already crew. The captain let her stay. Another allegedly vanished during a prison transfer, only to reappear 6 months later under a different name, sailing with a Dutch flag. When she died in a skirmish, they buried her as a man. Historians still argue how many women pirates lived this way. You hear someone say by the water barrel. Some think there were dozens, others hundreds. And you wonder how many simply became shadows in the rigging. You start to collect their stories. Not written, no ink or parchment here, but carved into memory, stitched into breath. You repeat them in your head at night like prayers. One woman jumped ship and swam 5 miles to a fishing boat. Another lived for years disguised as a cabin boy, only discovered after a fight when her shirt was torn. One, they say, escaped while scrubbing the floor of the courthouse, walked right out the front door, mop still in hand. They don't have statues, no memorials, but they exist in the cracks, in the pauses, in the not quite told histories buried beneath names like anonymous or unrecorded. Sometimes you picture yourself doing it, slipping on someone else's identity like a jacket, disappearing beneath it. You find yourself watching the guards more carefully, measuring the gaps between their patrols, the slowness of the changing shifts, the way the uniforms hang loosely on the laundry line at night. It's a dangerous thought, a foolish one, but once you entertain it, it doesn't leave. Elsie, or whoever she really was, proved it could be done. That not every sentence ends with a noose or a bier. Some end in silence, and silence, when claimed intentionally, can be a kind of freedom. One day, while hauling crates from the storehouse, you find a scrap of cloth tucked behind the water cask, a sailor's kerchief, frayed at the edges, folded tight. Inside is a pin carved from bone, shaped like a tiny bird in flight. You pocket it, not because it means anything, but because it might. You don't see Elsie again. No one does. The official line is that she was reassigned, but the guards stop saying her name after a while. It fades off the list, off the logs, off the lips. You go down to the wall that night and carve one more line, just beneath Mina's. Some flew. You just never saw the wings. You step back and look at it. It doesn't feel like a goodbye, more like a breadcrumb. A trail left for someone else who might one day find it and know. There were more ways out than anyone ever told you. And maybe, just maybe, the ones who vanished weren't lost. They were just better at steering the wind. The rains come harder now, daily, almost without warning. They soak the cane fields, turn footpaths to muck, and fill the corners of the barracks with mold. The air stays heavy even at night, thick with the smell of wet wood and something sour beneath it. You cough more often now, so do the others. You try not to think about Mina's last cough, or the way her breath rattled like cracked glass. The sickness starts small. A girl with red eyes and a nosebleed, another who can't stop shivering, even in the heat. But within days, the symptoms spread like fire through dry sails. Soon, the beds are full. Women lie curled beneath damp blankets, sweating through their shifts, groaning in the dark. The overseers avoid the barracks, muttering about quarantine and blaming the rain. You fetch water, tear old cloth for rags, try to soothe the worst of it, though your hands are shaking more now and your head feels strange. The worst part isn't the fever, it's the waiting. No doctor comes, no medicine, just a bucket of vinegar water and the midwife from town, who arrives with her sleeves rolled up and a face like a cracked plate. "They won't send help," she says bluntly. "Too many prisoners, not enough priests." She doesn't mean it cruelly, just truthfully. You ask what it is. She shrugs. Could be fever, could be rot, could be grief. You believe her, because the sickness doesn't seem to follow any rules. Some women go down in a day, others last a week. One wakes up in the middle of the night screaming about the ocean, then dies with her fist clenched around invisible ropes. You try to help, but there's no stopping it. Eventually, the guards stop entering at all. They slide meals through the door without looking. If someone collapses in the yard, they haul them to a corner and wait for them to stop breathing. No one is sold. No one is moved. For a brief time, the island forgets it's a prison. It just becomes a place where women lie in rows and count the slow seconds between coughs. You sleep in a corner near the wall, your back pressed to the stone. You've avoided the worst so far, though you can feel something hollow forming in your chest, a tightness that lingers after every breath. The days blur, time softens. Sometimes you think you see Mina at the foot of your bed, or the French girl, arms folded, humming that same old lullaby. Once, you think you hear Anne Bonny's voice, low and amused, asking why you're still here. You whisper back, "Still writing." It helps, a little. One night, the woman in the bunk beside yours doesn't wake up. She's young, too young. You never learned her name. You drag her body to the back of the barracks where the others have been stacked, neatly, respectfully, like cargo waiting to be forgotten. There's no ceremony, just silence, and the flies. Later, you go to the wall with your last sliver of charcoal, hands trembling, fever just beneath the surface. You carve a line that's crooked and shallow, but still yours. Not lost, just burned too bright. It's harder to sleep now, not from noise, but from stillness. A stillness that presses against your chest like water. You dream of sinking, not drowning, sinking slowly, peacefully, as if the sea were pulling you home. In your waking hours, you remember other sicknesses you've heard of. Dysentery, scurvy, yellow jack. One woman mutters malaria in her fever dreams. Another swears it's a curse. You believe all of them, because this place wasn't built for survival. It was built for forgetting. And sickness is just another way to erase a name. Historians still argue how many died in places like this. The records are vague. Many aren't even listed by name, just numbers. Tallies scratched beside entries like shipment received or transfer incomplete. You've read those words before, in books. But now you see what they really mean. They mean women like Mina, and Beth, and the girl with the strong hands who never spoke. Gone without ink. One morning, a breeze comes through the broken window. It smells like salt, like the sea is waking up. You close your eyes and picture a ship, sails wide, ropes humming, waves thundering underfoot. You let the image pull you in, let it fill the empty parts of you. For a moment, the fever fades. You're not in the barracks. You're on the deck, the wind in your hair, a knife in your belt, a map in your hand, and no one's permission in your pockets. You remember how it felt, not to be safe, but to be yours. And that memory carries you through one more day. When the midwife returns, she counts the living with a tired frown. Half the beds are empty now. She shakes her head and whispers to herself, "This place eats hope like sugar," you whisper back. Not all of it, because you know something she doesn't. The wall is full now, no blank stones left. Every inch covered in names, and verses and lines that refuse to fade. Some are scratched over others, some are hidden behind furniture or beneath loose boards. But they're there, like scars, like stars. You touch them every day, trace the names like prayers, speak them aloud when no one's listening. Because even if you go next, even if the fever takes you tonight, your name is there too. And that means something. It means they didn't win. Not all the way. You survived the sickness. Barely. It lingers in your bones like a second shadow. Makes your steps slower, your breath shorter. But you're still here. Not one of the names whispered over and forgotten. Not a tally mark in some overseer's logbook. You still wake each morning. You still remember. And that, somehow, feels like defiance. The guards return after the worst of it passes, like scavengers circling after the storm. They pretend nothing happened. No questions, no apologies, just barked orders and the return of chores and rules. The plantation creaks back into routine, but something's changed. The wall is full. The songs have stopped. And the stories, oh, the stories, they're sharper now. They start with a new rumor, a name whispered by one of the field girls. Jean Martel. It stops you in your tracks. You've heard the name before. Once, months ago, on the lips of a drunken guard. A woman who was sentenced to hang in Saint-Domingue for piracy, caught raiding off the southern coast. She was supposed to be dead. But now, someone says she was seen boarding a French ship last week, disguised as a passenger's maid, laughing, alive. You sit by the kitchen fire that night and listen to the tale unfold in fragments. She charmed a jailer, bribed a priest, escaped during a fire, was never even in the jail to begin with. The versions contradict, but they all end the same. Jean Martel did not hang. The next day, the tale spreads like kindling catching light. She hid in a coffin. No, she faked a sickness, wore a mask, walked right past the guards. I heard she stabbed a magistrate's son and stole his clothes. Everyone has a version, and suddenly, every woman you know is remembering someone else, another pirate, another sister, who was supposed to be executed but vanished instead. Lucia Graves, hanged in Kingston? A lie. She escaped through the courtroom drain. Inez Duarte, burned in Havana? Not true. She's living on a tobacco farm, disguised as a widow. Diane Petrel, drowned in a prison barge? Never happened. She's married to a shipbuilder now. The facts blur, bend, but you don't care. Because even if the stories aren't all true, the hope they spark is, and there are records, old ones, smudged and yellowed, where executions are listed, but bodies were never buried. Ship manifests that bear familiar names, long after those names were meant to be gone. Historians still argue whether these were mistakes, cover-ups, or miracles. Some call them clerical errors. Others call them myths. But you've lived through enough to know, where there is silence, there's always space to hide a story. You begin collecting these names in your head, not just the ones from the wall, but the ones spoken in secret. Jean, Lucia, Inez, Diane, names that are supposed to be graves, but instead bloom like lanterns in the dark. And the more you listen, the more you start to see patterns. Like the midwife who visits too often and always leaves with an empty satchel. Like the boatman who ferries supplies but always whistles the same shanty, one only old sailors know. Like the girl in the laundry who writes letters she never mails and folds them into tiny boats that she hides behind the water barrels. You begin to wonder, how many women here were executed on paper but simply walked out of the back door? How many others played dead to live again? One night, you sit by the window with the sound of crickets in your ears and start to carve a new word onto the edge of your cot, just under the frame. Maybe, just that, because maybe one woman made it. Maybe more than one. Maybe this whole island was a place of endings that weren't real endings at all. There's one woman, old and bent, who's worked the kitchen since before you arrived. She's mostly ignored, her voice a rasp. But one evening, as you help her carry a basin of water, She mutters without looking at you. They said I died in 1724. You pause. She doesn't explain, doesn't repeat herself, just smiles with her eyes and keeps walking. Later that night, you scratch a new name onto the back of the wall. No one sees you do it. No one has to. Annika Delane, hung but not hollow. You don't know if that's her real name, but it feels right. The next time you pass the laundry lines, you see a young girl tucking something into the folds of a dress, barely a glimpse, just the edge of a folded map. Her eyes meet yours for a flicker of a moment. You nod once, so does she. And the whisper begins again. She's got passage. Her cousin's a sailor. She bribed the stable hand. You don't ask if it's true. You already know. Truth, in a place like this, isn't just facts. It's what refuses to stay buried. And whether it's by faking death or folding into someone else's life, there's always another way. Even when the rope tightens, even when the priest prays, even when the record says executed, you carve one final line beneath your bed that week. A sentence you've been carrying since the day you saw the names on the wall. Some of us are ghosts, but some of us are smoke. You smile when you write it, because smoke doesn't vanish. It rises. The first time you hear laughter again, it's strange. Not the sharp, bitter kind that echoes through the fields during punishment or illness. Not the kind laced with pain. This is real laughter. Warm, sudden, free. It comes from the guards' quarters one evening. A group of them huddle around a pamphlet, nudging each other, pointing at something printed in thick black ink. One is laughing so hard he nearly drops his mug. Another wipes tears from his eyes. You lean closer as you walk past with a water bucket. You catch a glimpse of the headline, The Pirate Bride of Bristol, a comedic farce in 2 acts. Underneath, a sketch, a woman in a ridiculous tricorn hat, skirt hiked up to reveal a pistol tucked into her garter. She's swooning into the arms of a foppish captain, his wig askew and sword comically bent. Later, you hear them quoting lines from it, bad accents, exaggerated gestures. They act out scenes during evening patrols, mocking voices, pretending to faint or duel with brooms. One even says, "If they all looked like that, I'd sign up to be captured." You don't laugh, because you've seen what comes after the curtain falls. Word spreads quickly. Apparently, it's playing in a dozen port towns across the colonies. Traveling actors in powdered wigs reenacting true stories of lady pirates, stealing kisses and treasure, throwing men overboard, only to fall in love with the captain and abandon the sea for a proper corset. The women around you hear it too. Some roll their eyes, others go quiet, but the sting is there. Underneath, you think of the wall, of names scratched deep, of fingernails broken to leave behind one word that mattered, and now it's all been turned into theater. Mina's voice echoes in your head. They don't want the truth. They want a tale to frighten girls with, or worse, a tale to entertain them. You hear another title whispered around campfires by guards, Queen of the Cannons, the Harlot of Hispaniola. In that one, they say the pirate heroine is captured after falling for a naval officer, who tames her wild heart with a kiss and a wedding ring. You want to scream, you don't. Instead, you begin collecting the stories they don't tell on stage. Like the girl who led a mutiny aboard a Spanish merchant vessel and threw the captain overboard after he tried to sell her. Or the woman who carved a compass into her thigh as a reminder of where not to return. Or the 3 sisters who turned their fishing boat into a smuggling ship and vanished into the reefs, never to be caught. You whisper them to the younger ones at night. Real stories, quiet ones. No corsets, no romance arcs, just grit, salt, steel. You wonder how many of those actresses ever stood on a real deck. How many cried the first time they tasted salt air and blood at the same time? How many know what it's like to wake with rope scars on their wrists and rats chewing at your boots? Probably none. Historians still argue whether theater shaped the myth of female pirates or merely mirrored it. One of the overseers says one afternoon, sounding proud of the sentence he clearly borrowed from a book, but you know the answer. It warped it, turned women who fought and bled into jokes and punchlines, pretty faces with daggers tucked into silk, fire in their eyes until a man taught them to smile instead. You begin to carve again. Not on the wall this time. On the inside of the storage bin beneath your bunk, where you keep your spare shirt and the dried orange peel you save for the scent. We didn't swoon. We survived. You press hard enough to splinter the wood. Days later, one of the women from the laundry tells you she saw something strange in town, a poster being taken down. The title? The Mad Maidens of the Main. Another farce, another vanishing act. They said it was canceled, she says. Too political, or maybe too boring. You smile at that, because in their need to twist the story, they made it shallow, and shallow stories don't last. But you realize something else too. These plays, as frustrating as they are, mean one thing. The world knows about you. Not you personally, maybe, but the idea of you. The woman who said no, who picked up a blade, who didn't stay in her place. Even if they turn her into a joke, they can't unwrite her. And somewhere, sitting in the back row of one of those cheap theaters, a girl might be watching, frowning, thinking, wondering what the real story was. You hold on to that, because myths can be reshaped. You've seen it, you've done it. Back in the cellar, the wall is still full, but you find a patch of floorboard, loose at the corner. You pry it open and begin carving beneath it, a new kind of stage, one that no one sees but everyone feels. You write, "The world laughed, but we sang louder," and you believe it, because theater fades, ink fades, but stone remembers, and the truth is still here, underneath the wigs and the powdered cheeks and the velvet curtains. You press your palm to the floorboard, you feel it thrum, and that night, when the wind blows in from the sea, it carries not lines from a play but an old shanty, half sung, half forgotten. Not the kind with rhymes about love or lace, but the kind sung when the sails go up. And every woman on deck has blood on her hands and salt in her teeth. There's a legend that begins to circulate around the island, not in the overseer's quarters or between the guards, but in whispers passed quietly from woman to woman as they stir pots, scrub floors, or hang damp linens in the sun. The story travels like a tide, quiet, steady, undeniable. It starts with a place, Madagascar. You hear the name one morning while scrubbing laundry, your hands numb from cold water. A woman beside you, Mary's, small and wiry, with a scar that cuts through one brow, leans in and says, "They had a haven, you know, a real one, far across the sea." You blink. A haven? She nods, her voice just above breath. Pirates, women, they weren't prisoners there. They ruled. You frown. You mean a port? No, she says. A settlement. They called them the Sea Wives. You feel something flicker inside you, half memory, half hunger. That night, Maris tells you the full story. It begins decades ago, when a rogue group of pirates, men and women both, tired of chasing prizes across blood-stained water, settled on the coast of Madagascar. Far from Navy patrols and trade routes, they carved a small village out of jungle and coral. But when the men drifted off or died in skirmishes, the women remained. And they made it theirs. They farmed, they fished, they traded with local villages. But most of all, they protected their own. No masters, no overseers, no gallows, just women who had lived too long beneath someone else's rule deciding, finally, that they'd write their own. They became known as the Sea Wives. Some say they took in orphan girls and escaped slaves, that they trained each other in sailing and sabotage, that they sent coded letters across the world to other women like you, offering refuge if you could just make it far enough. Historians still argue whether the Sea Wives really existed, Mara says as she leans back in the grass. Some say it was a myth, a story invented to keep us from giving up. You ask her if she believes. She doesn't hesitate. I have to. And just like that, you do too. Because it's not the kind of story born from boredom or theater. It's not like the plays. It doesn't end in marriage or repentance. It ends in land, in shelter, in choosing. After that, everything shifts. When you close your eyes at night, it's no longer the sound of the gallows you hear in your dreams. It's surf lapping at red shores, the wind stirring banana leaves. You see fires lit in iron braziers, women gathered around maps drawn on bark, planning routes not for plunder, but for freedom. You begin to ask questions, subtle, careful ones. To the old stable girl who once sailed with a merchant fleet, to the cook's assistant who mutters in Portuguese when she's tired, to the quiet girl in the fields with rope burns on her palms and the eyes of someone who's seen storm after storm. Each time, the answer comes in the form of a look, sometimes a nod, sometimes a whispered name. Anton Gil Bay, Nosy Boraha, the Red Cove, a trail, maybe a memory. Then, one morning, the cargo manifest changes. A new skiff arrives with barrels of salt cod and, more curiously, a map stuffed inside a crate, damp and curling, but marked with coastlines that are not from these waters. You're told to burn it. You don't. You hide it, study it, trace the unfamiliar curves of Madagascar's coastline with your finger late at night beneath the moonlight slanting through your window. There are marks on it, notations in faint ink, small dots that seem almost random. But one, just one, has a name scrawled beside it. Haven. You don't say anything, not to the others, not even to Maris, not yet, because even hope can be dangerous when said too loud. But inside you, something stirs. A plan, vague and fragile, begins to take shape. You don't know how you'd get there. There's no ship waiting, no smuggler in your pocket, but the idea of it pulls at you like a current. You start working harder, speaking less. You save scraps, bread, fabric, a bit of twine, just in case. The story spreads. A woman in the kitchen carves a small M into the wood beneath the bread table. Another starts leaving small tokens, a bead, a feather, on the windowsill each night. You begin to realize it's more than a tale now. It's a signal, a password, a direction, a possibility. And as with all stories, there are doubters. Some say it's just another lie, a dream sold to keep you obedient. Others say the Sea Wives were slaughtered years ago, that no such place remains. But you've learned something in this place, even if the Sea Wives never existed, even if the red shores of Madagascar hold nothing but sand and wind, even if the haven is only a word carved in wood, the story still matters, because it feels true. And in the dark, when you need something to hold on to, that's enough. One night, you add your mark to the map, a small X over Bridgetown. Below it, you write a single word in charcoal: remember. Because if you don't make it, maybe someone else will. Maybe another woman will find that map and that mark and take one more step toward the edge of the world. And maybe, just maybe, she'll find a red shore waiting, with fires lit, and sails drying on driftwood poles, and women with knives and songs and names they chose for themselves. The sea wives, still there, still waiting, still free. The closer you get to believing in the sea wives, the more the stories begin to change, not just in tone, but in texture, shifting from whispers of escape to something older, deeper, stranger. The kind of stories that don't bother proving themselves, because they live in the marrow of women who've lived too long in cages. It starts with a guard, a young one, superstitious, always twitching at the shadows. One evening, as he's locking the barrack door, he mutters, "Heard a voice in the water last night, singing." He chuckles like it's a joke, but his hands are shaking. You and the others say nothing. You've all heard the sea at night. It groans, it hisses, it murmurs through the mangroves like it has something to confess. But then another guard says it, and then one of the washerwomen, and then an old fisherman who passes by the estate once a week for salt and dried yam. "Saw her out past the reef," he says, scratching his chin. Long hair, pale skin, vanish like smoke. They called her a mermaid, or a ghost, or a pirate come back for revenge. The names shift, but the outline remains. A woman, in the sea, refusing to drown. One afternoon, Maris leans close and whispers, "They're not wrong. You know, there are women in the water." You tilt your head. "Escaped?" She nods once. "Some others, I don't know. Maybe they never boarded a ship at all. Maybe they were born in the tide." You laugh, but gently. "I'm serious," she says. "Some say when a woman dies on the gallows unjustly, the sea takes her back, doesn't let her go all the way, turns her into something else." Hello, you sit with that idea for a while. Not because you believe it, but because you want to. You start to collect these stories like pebbles. You tuck them into corners of your memory, polish them with thought. You learn the differences between salt myths and rain myths, between the ones told to frighten children and the ones whispered between women on sleepless nights. In one version, the mermaid is a pirate queen who sank her own ship to avoid capture and became something eternal. In another, she's a young girl cast off a prison barge who grew gills rather than die. In yet another, she's a curse, drawn to ships full of men who once chained women to the decks. Sometimes the stories contradict each other. That never matters, because the truth isn't in the facts. It's in the need, the longing for something more than just survival. You hear it in the way the women hum when they bathe near the shore now, the way they watch the horizon like it's not just a border, but a doorway. And the songs start up again, not the ones about hangings or heartbreak, the old ones, the sea ones. They're low and rhythmic and strange, half language, half memory, words you don't quite understand, but your bones do. You begin to hum them too. One night, a storm rolls in, violent, thunderous, tearing branches from trees and flooding the path to the barracks. The guards retreat. The lanterns blow out. You sit on your cot, back pressed to the wall, and listen as the roof moans above you. And just for a moment, you swear you hear it. Not thunder, not wind, a voice, faint and steady, from far away, singing. You rise and walk barefoot to the window. The rain slices against your skin. The sea glows faintly under the lightning, each wave lit like a breath. And there, barely visible through the blur, you think you see something move just beyond the reef. A figure, still, watching. You blink, it's gone. The next morning, the guards are tense. They mutter about footprints near the dock, about a rope gone missing, about a guard who swears he saw someone climbing into the trees with hair like seaweed and eyes that didn't blink. The overseer rolls his eyes, but his hand rests on his pistol all day. You don't say a word. But that night, you carve one more line into the bottom of the floorboard. Some sank, some swam, Some became the tide. It helps to write it. It helps to believe it, because belief is a kind of survival. Not the loud church bell kind, but the quiet, stubborn kind. The kind that lets you keep moving when your body wants to stop. The kind that keeps the rope from winning. Maris tells you another tale the next day. One she saved until now. She says there's a cave on the northern coast, just above the surf line. Covered in barnacles and invisible unless you're right on top of it. Inside, there are carvings. Dozens of them. Names, mostly. Some you'd recognize, others lost to time. And in the back, there's a shallow pool that reflects the sky so perfectly, you can't tell where water ends and air begins. She says, if you kneel beside it and whisper your name, the tide will carry it to the women below, the ones who never made it out, the ones who still wait, the ones who became something else. You ask if she's ever seen it. She shakes her head. Not yet. You nod. Me neither. But someday. Maybe. You find yourself drawing maps in your head again, not of escape routes or hiding spots, but of stories, the sea wives, the mermaids, the cave, the songs. You don't know if any of them are real, but you know this, they feel true, and that's enough. Because this world doesn't need more facts. It needs memory. It needs women who whisper to each other in the dark and carve their names into stone and walk into the sea not to vanish, but to change. The last days pass like breath, quiet, barely felt, but undeniably real. No new guards arrive. No new ship stock. The skiff hasn't visited in weeks, and the overseer seems to have retreated behind shutters and ledgers, growing smaller with each sunset. It's as if the island itself is beginning to forget its purpose. But you don't forget. You wake before the bell now. Sit by the window and let the morning light creep across your hands. You press your fingers into the warmth and remind yourself, you're still here. The others have grown quiet too, not from fear, but from clarity. It's no longer about escape or rebellion. It's about memory, about what will remain. And so, you begin to gather the pieces. You visit the wall again, your palms brushing over names you know and those you never learned. You read each one aloud, slowly, carefully, as if naming them brings them back from whatever silence tried to swallow them. Mina Nels, Eliza Vane, Beth, Clara, Maris. Some names were scratched with nails, others with bone or metal. Some are misspelled. Some are nothing more than initials. But everyone is proof. I was here. And now, your fingers find your own. The letters have faded a little, worn down by rain and dust, but they're still there, still yours. You kneel beside the wall and whisper, I didn't vanish. Then you whisper it again, louder this time, like a vow. Out in the field, the cane stands overgrown, uncut. The guards barely supervise anymore. The old rhythms have unraveled. No one's been sold. No one's been sent to town. And slowly, something begins to shift. You start to see it in the others, the way they carry themselves. Shoulders less slumped, voice is more certain, laughter that doesn't hide. They're remembering too, not just who they were, but what they are. One night, under a thick blanket of stars, you and a few others gather behind the storage shed with pieces of charcoal, broken tiles, and threadbare rope, not to plan an escape, not to write letters, but to record. You scrawl stories onto planks, trace maps in the dirt, recite names like hymns. You don't care if anyone ever finds them. That's not the point. The point is to say it, to say, we lived, we endured, we mattered. Historians still argue about how many women pirates truly existed. about whether they were criminals or victims, about whether their stories were exaggerated, softened, erased. But you've lived in the space between those arguments, and you know the truth. History remembers what it wants to remember, and forgets what makes it uncomfortable. You've seen your story turned into comedy, caution, legend, but never truth. So you write it yourself, in charcoal, in whispers, in footsteps that press the grass flat beneath your heels. One evening, as the tide comes in thick and glassy, you walk alone to the shore. The sea is calm, humming. It's high enough to lap at your ankles. You take out the map, the one you saved, the one marked with Haven. It's tattered now, water-stained, corners missing, but it still speaks. You fold it gently, then bury it at the base of a rock, tucking it under wet sand and a flat shell. Maybe no one will find it. Maybe someone will. It doesn't matter. You stand there for a long time, waves swirling around your calves. Then you say one last thing, softly, to the sea, carry us. And maybe, just maybe, it will. The next day, you wake to the sound of sails. Real sails. Not the canvas of laundry snapping in the breeze or the imagination's whisper, but a ship, offshore, small, gray, nearly invisible against the horizon. You watch it from behind the barracks, heart steady. It never comes close, never anchors, just lingers at a respectful distance. You squint for a second. You swear you see a woman at the helm, hair bound, eyes fixed on the island. She raises a hand, not waving, just still, present, and then the ship turns, slides back into the mist, leaving no wake. You don't tell the others, but you go to the wall that night and carve one last line. Some were lost, some were found. We remember us. You stand back, breathing slowly. The words glisten in the lantern light, raw and uneven, perfect. You run your fingers across each groove one final time. The island won't be yours forever. One day it will be cleared, renamed, forgotten, the walls torn down, the names scrubbed clean. But you will have written something deeper than any record, a history too quiet to be captured, but too real to be erased. And so, as you lie down beneath a sky soft with stars, you let yourself drift, not to sleep, not just yet, but into something better, into knowing, into peace, into the truth you carried, even when no one asked to hear it. You are not a myth. You are not a mistake. You are not a footnote. You were a pirate, and you survived. So now, as the waves fall quiet and the night settles around your shoulders like a worn, soft cloak, you let go of the stories for a while. You followed the journey, step by step, name by name, through the dust of jails, the creak of ships, and the shadows of forgotten islands. You've listened to voices that history once tried to silence. But here in this stillness, in the hush that follows the storm, there's something else waiting for you. Peace. You lie back now, letting the rhythm of the sea fill your breath. A breeze slips past the windows, cool and salty, as if it carried something distant and kind. The stars blink above, faint but steady, just like the names carved into that old stone wall, just like you. You're no longer holding the weight of their stories. You're resting in them, floating, safe. Maybe you hear the faint echo of a lullaby from the coast of Madagascar, or a shanty hummed in secret. Maybe, if you listen closely, the sea will murmur a name you thought the world had forgotten. And if it does, don't worry. It's just memory, coming home. Close your eyes. Let the salt wind drift through your dreams. You've earned this quiet. You've earned this rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.